My life was transformed by a single word spoken by a stranger. Here I was at 28 years of age in the slums of Mumbai, India. Been making my way along the edge of a drain, trying my hardest not to fall into the green slime that lay beneath me, when all of a sudden my ears were drawn to the sound of a woman calling out, "Welcome." As I turned my head, she spoke again. "Welcome," she said, with a beaming smile on her face. I smiled back, and I began to look around me. Here along this drain I'd been following were pieces of tin and cardboard boxes shaped into shelters as far as the eye could see. And there, amidst the endless streams of dumped rubbish and its inescapable stench, a cardboard box was what this woman called home. And despite all this, she reached out to me, and I was no longer a stranger in a foreign place, but a welcome guest. A single word and a smile uniting us in our common humanity. That encounter was the moment in time between my old life and my new life, and nothing has ever been the same. That experience was the seed for my decision to go on a quest, which initially took me back to India. But I ended up following one invitation after another for several years, embarking on a rather unplanned but very intentional journey throughout the globe, seeking to understand what it is that we can learn from one another and what my role might be in making a difference. I slept on hundreds of couches and was adopted by families everywhere. It didn't seem to matter whether I was in Fifth Avenue, Manhattan, or a refugee camp in Palestine. It was the generosity I experienced as a stranger that taught me the most. One of the most profound encounters from that journey took place one day when I was in Kenya, in East Africa. And I'd been with my local companions to visit a small project in a village, and on our way back to the main highway, travelling along a very bumpy dirt track, something caught my eye. It was just a speck of white between the trees in the distance, but we spontaneously decided to investigate. And as we drove up through those trees, there was the poorest school I'd ever seen. No doors or windows on the classroom, a tattered flag hanging on for dear life atop a flagpole. The principal came bounding out of his office, looking rather startled at our arrival, and quickly motioned for one of the children to bring us a chair. And we sat there in the tall grass as he eagerly shared about his school. I asked if I could say hello to some of the students in the classroom, something I'd been doing at a few other places along my journey. But this time, the students didn't enthusiastically sing me a song in the way I'd been accustomed to. In fact, as I entered the classroom, many of the students began to cry. The principal turned to me and explained it's not just the colour of your skin. It's everything about you. It's your long hair, your camera, your sunglasses. These children don't have television. They've never seen a white person. This school has been here for 60 years, and you're the first visitor we've ever had. The children did eventually warm to me, intensely curious about this alien who had appeared through the trees, as you can see in this photo. That whole experience shifted my perspective 180 degrees. I realised that I'd naively believed that everyone around the world is totally connected now. But the truth is, many of our communities, and even individuals within our communities, are more isolated than ever. The biggest thing I learned from that unexpected encounter was to pay attention to what I like to call the spaces in between. That is where the wisdom lies. The life lessons await us along the way to where we think we are going. Towards the end of that extraordinary quest around the globe, I met an 80-year-old man named Greg in New Mexico. And after getting to know one another, he came up to me one day, poking me in his usual eccentric way. And he said, "Hey, Penny," he said, "you're going where the dots are not joined." I remember feeling like every cell in my body was doing a happy dance. And everything began to make sense. So I decided to set up joining the dots, to ignite a movement of connection within ourselves, with our communities, and to our place. I came up with this sketch sitting under a tree one day. I wanted the Joining the Dots logo to speak to people of every age, in every land. I knew it needed to embrace the patterns of nature herself. And the inward spiral seemed to perfectly represent something that had very little to do with me, and a lot to do with the unfolding of creation and our very best human potential at this moment in time. And that is how it ended up. The spark of light that comes when the dots join is what I like to call the magic. And this vision collided with opportunity several years later when I was at a lunch one day and I met a group of women from South Sudan who in conversation said to me, "Penny, I've been here for 5 years and no Australian people have ever invited me to their home." And the other lady piped up and said, "Well, I've been here for 10 years and I've never been to an Australian home either, but I'd love to go." And that very same afternoon, 2 of my colleagues came up to me and asked me if I'd introduce them to someone who'd come here as a migrant or a refugee, saying that they'd been looking for about 10 years to welcome new people, but they just didn't know where to go to find them. They were also concerned they might do or say something culturally inappropriate. So here we were, in one of the most culturally diverse cities in the world, and people were not finding a way to meet, even when they wanted to. Fast forward several weeks, and the very first welcome dinner was taking place in my home in Sydney, beginning the first project of Joining the Dots. We all had so much fun that night, though I think if you had told me that there were hundreds and hundreds of these dinners to come, I would have dived under the couch and not come out for a very long time. But seriously, what I saw that night was people's eyes shining. And what I heard can only be described as the sound of connection. The idea of a welcome dinner is that it's held in a local home, or sometimes on a larger scale at a community venue. The welcome dinner recipe brings together about 8 long-term Australians with 8 newly arrived people. Then there's a host, and most importantly, there are at least 2 of our trained volunteers who go along to lead the activities and generally hold a safe and welcoming space. Every welcome dinner is different, with a different mix of people and different types of spaces, but there's something that always feels the same. We set this consistent tone, firstly, through food. There's always an incredible spread. Welcome dinners are potluck, because this is what creates a level playing field. Because no matter what your income is or where you've come from, everybody brings something to share and tells a story about their dish. And all of this is crowdsourced, and it's all delicious. You can't buy this kind of global culinary experience in any restaurant. Here we are filming a welcome dinner for Channel 10's The Project, and there's Matt Preston from MasterChef with his New York cheesecake. The second aspect of our consistent tone is created by overcoming the barriers which exist in our society, including the labels we often hear. So when you turn up to a welcome dinner, the first thing we ask you is, "What is your passion?" And we write it on your name tag. And this becomes the focus from that moment on. Talking about work or how you came to Australia is off limits. And because of this, we quickly get to the heart of things and realise our commonalities. The third feature of our consistent tone is our focus on paying attention to the little things, because we've discovered that this is what makes all the difference. Let me give you an example, and this could apply to any one of our guests, but I'll use the name Sue. When it was Sue's turn to introduce her dish, she mumbled through the name of it in her traditional language before going on to describe how it was her grandma's recipe. And our facilitator asked, "Sue, would you mind telling us the name of your dish again in your first language?" And then everyone around the table had a go at saying it. Here, in this subtle moment, we are embracing and celebrating people's cultural backgrounds, and in doing so, one's sense of identity is strengthened. This can be a deeply healing experience and lead to feelings of acceptance and welcome. The final contributor to our tone is a ritual we call the speech bubble. It's simply a way of inviting people to share just one word about how they feel at the end of the meal. We've been doing it since the very first welcome dinner. And it's like a magnifying glass, looking into the transformations that takes place. Well, that was the technical details, but now I want to tell you about the power of this community-driven movement. 4 years ago, I was at a party and I met a young man from Afghanistan named Zaki. Zaki travelled here after experiencing the unimaginable trauma of his father being murdered by members of the Taliban. He risked everything to come here in order to make his parents proud and fulfill his father's dream that his children might one day go to university. Zaki bravely signed up to host a welcome dinner, along with his housemates, who are also here seeking asylum. On the morning of their welcome lunch, they dragged themselves out of bed at 6 a.m, about 5 hours earlier than they'd normally wake up on a Saturday, and began to clean the house from top to toe, nervously fueled by their nervous excitement that Australian people were going to come to their house, including women and children, something they hadn't experienced since they came here. As they fired up the Persian barbecue out the back, they kept saying to one another, "What if we don't have enough food?" and running out to the shops to buy more meat. But pretty soon, the doorbell rang, and unfamiliar yet friendly faces began to enter their somewhat smoky home. But before long, all of their fears were subsided, and the crowd collectively cooked up its welcome dinner magic. Zaki says that was the first day Australia felt like home. He and his mates were invited to their new friend's house for dinner the following Sunday, and finally they began to feel accepted here. What's so extraordinary about this story and hundreds of other welcome dinner stories is that it reveals to us, with a bit of imagination and some cooperation, we can rewrite the script. Here we had a bunch of people who are not welcome in Australia, at least at a policy level, hosting local Australians, pooling their minimal resources to step into the unknown. And others, perhaps who have been here their whole life, daring to follow their curiosity and their goodwill into new territory. You see, when we let go of business as usual, even for a moment, and take a deep dive into being of service to one another, a new space opens up between us. And pretty quickly, we realise we are the same. What we are seeing at these dinners is transformation. Not all the time, but often. How can it be that in the space of 2 hours, we are seeing people share their speech bubbles saying, "This is the first time I feel free. I've never felt listened to like this before. I don't feel homesick anymore." What this project has taught us is that deep listening is the missing link. This is not something we can do for ourselves. We co-create the space for listening. We offer it to one another. And in doing so, we are playing in the space in between. The welcome dinner model requires us to fully show up, to gather all of our apprehension and our vulnerability and place it in the mix. The real magic happens when we sit at a dinner table with people who speak a different language to us and draw on every one of our creative resources to try to communicate with one another. It's when we go beyond our comfort zone and eat something we've never tried before, or join in the cultural dance lesson that just emerged in the corner of the room. Not much is going to happen if we sit alone at our dinner tables. But in the space between you and me, there's a magic that awaits us. Perhaps you can feel it right now. There's alchemy at work. We cannot create transformation for our society. We can only have it unfold amongst us. Through the Welcome Dinner Project, we find ourselves within a story that has made sense of life for many people. And I give gratitude for every single person who has given extensively of their time and their resources and their heart to bring this dream to life. Being witness to the transformation of so many lives has given me the confidence to know that as much as we can try to join the dots, it's the dots that would join us. Just like in the art of our First Nations people, it's not so much the dots that create the picture, but the spaces between the dots. The universe is transitioning us into a new era through movements like this. And to bring about many more movements of kindness, we need to adopt a new way of seeing. Where is that woman calling out, "Welcome," just beyond your focus? Where is that speck of white between the trees, beckoning you to come explore, to turn your curiosity into action? We know that a single word spoken into the in-between places can transform someone's life. And when we do this collectively, we might just see our communities become magnificently connected places, filled with the sense of belonging we all long for. Zaki, Sue, the woman who calls a cardboard box home, the children without a visitor, have gifted us today a reminder of our common humanity and the potential that lies in the spaces between us. When we awaken this potential individually, we awaken globally. I sense the invitation to pay attention to the spaces in between in every moment. And if you can sense it too, join me, for our world is ripe for connection.